All right, welcome, Dr. Miaken Zeigler of the future Monarch Family Chiropractic. I'm so excited that you're here for this conversation. When it comes to nutrition, obviously I titled this Nutrition Essentials, but eating healthy foods, eating nutrient-dense foods is vital for our health. And if there's one thing that's been left out of coverage around COVID in the last 2 years, it's been, what are the things that create health, right? How can we create a healthy body and immune system that when we are exposed to COVID, our body has the best chances for taking care of it, right? And so I hope this will give you some insight on what you can start to do today to make better choices around your nutrition. So first, let's start here. This is back in March of 1936. This is a Senate document, and they found that 99% of the American people are deficient in minerals and a marked deficiency in any one of the more important minerals that actually results in disease. Okay, this is back in 1936. So 100 or not even 100 years ago. And do you know that most of us today are suffering from certain dangerous diet deficiencies, which cannot be remedied until the depleted soils from which our foods come are brought into proper mineral balance? Okay. Fruits and vegetables and grains now being raised on millions of acres of lands no longer contain enough of certain needed minerals, and we are being starved no matter how much we eat. This is 1930s. Fast forward to 2021, and we are still challenged with deficiencies in our nutrients in the foods that we eat. Do you think that we have improved our soils in the last 85, 90 years? Do you think it's gotten worse? So the more important it is that we are aware of the foods we're eating and how they nourish our bodies. Okay, another fact here. So let me go back. So Americans are overfed and undernourished. So there is not a lack of food available, and yet the food that is available are calorie rich, nutrient poor. They are fatty, starchy, sweetened, prepackaged, overprocessed, and artificially preserved junk foods. Our foods are engineered to taste a certain way, to create this explosion of senses, with impacting our taste buds that respond to sweetness and bitterness and saltiness, right? Our foods are engineered in a way for us to crave them and want to continue eating them. So when we look at, most overweight people are undernourished at the cellular level. Cellular starvation results in a continuous craving for what is lacking in our bodies. So it creates a vicious cycle where we overeat, then we gain weight, and then we try these fad diets to lose a lot of weight in little time. And then we can create a really dangerous internal environment, body-wise, and external environment of, really problems. So understand that this is a bigger challenge and this is a bigger issue, because if we are trying to choose more nutrient dense foods, already our nutrition is deficient. And so this is where we can create more well-rounded diet with the foods that we eat. And then we got to look at supplementation, right? So the CDC on obesity, 42.4% of US adults were obese in 2017, 2018. And the WHO estimated that 3/4 of Americans will be overweight or obese by 2020. obesity-related conditions, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancers, and it costs a lot. In 2008, it cost over $147 billion to address obesity. So how are we doing? 3/4 of Americans will be overweight or obese by 2020. In 2021, the stats were 78% of folks who ended up in the ICU with COVID were obese. 78%. It's a pretty significant number. And so where's the conversation around carrying extra weight, being overweight, or being obese, right? If you knew that it could cut your risks to potentially dying of COVID, we need to address this. And 95% of COVID deaths, this is straight from the CDC, 95% of COVID deaths had up to 4 comorbidities. So obesity is a related condition to other diseases like heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancer. So if you are obese or overweight, you're likely to have other comorbidities. Not only does it cost a lot of money, but it could cost you your life, right? So this is a conversation that needs to be had and so important. It is, it is life altering, right? So what we eat, what's going on with our foods needs to be addressed. So let's just cover a few more things. Heart disease, it's considered the silent killer. We are a culture that really likes to evaluate our health through our symptoms and how we feel. But heart disease is the leading cause of death in America. And the first symptom we get is a heart attack. Kills most people. So when it comes to really being driven, really driving our health based on how we feel, that's also a problem, right? So leading cause of death in both men and women and people of most racial and ethnic groups in the US. In the US, someone has a heart attack every 40 seconds and 1 in every 4 deaths are attributed to heart disease. It's also pretty expensive, $219 billion each year, and this was back in 2014, 2015. Stroke, fifth leading cause of death. In the US, someone has a stroke every 40 seconds. Diabetes, almost 10% of Americans have diabetes, 7th leading cause of death. So key risk factors: high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, smoking, diabetes, overweight, or obesity, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, or excessive alcohol use. So we've got to make some changes here, right? Because unfortunately, this is the average person who is dealing with one of these conditions. And if you fall into the realm of having some of these risk factors, using COVID as an example, the outlook doesn't look so good, right? So let's look at how we can change things. Before we do, I found this to be a fascinating survey. This is an old survey. Back in 1997, this was the USDA did a survey on how Americans spent their food dollars. This is the top 10 list. Let's take a look at this because we're talking food. So we got cigarettes, we've got Coca-Cola. Okay, number 3, we got our first food here. Kraft macaroni and cheese. So that's a boxed macaroni and cheese. We got Pepsi, we've got Diet Coke, okay, Budweiser. Oh, we got our second food at number 7, Campbell's soup. Then we got Tide detergent, Folgers coffee, and Winston cigarettes. This is back in, it was over 20 years ago, 25 years ago. How are we doing? Do you think we've gotten better or worse with how we're spending our money?
Definitely, I don't know, maybe a little worse.
Sounds like Adam right there. I would agree with you, Adam. We didn't do so well back in 1997. I don't think we're doing so well now, especially when we're looking at macaroni and cheese and Campbell's soup being the way we feed our bodies. So I wish they would do a new survey. I think that majority of majority of Americans this has been a couple years ago that I read this study, but there was a flip-flop where we used to cook, and most Americans had grocery shopped and made their food. Now we see a flip-flop where most Americans are going out and eating a lot of takeout and eating a lot of food in restaurants. So when you're not cooking your own food, you don't necessarily know what's in the foods. So that's going to be one thing I want to just cover and talk about real quick here. So how can we make better choices when it comes to the foods that we eat? And I think we've really got to simplify things. Back in 1999, when they looked at a composition of dozens of foods and they compared them to the records in 1950. Well, again, this goes back to what we read at the start of this presentation. 1936, they found that our minerals we were deficient in many minerals and our soils were lacking. So here we go, 1950. They found when they looked at foods for protein, calcium, potassium, iron, vitamin C, vitamin D, B12, they were all lacking across the board. And we've not improved soil quality or farming practices since then. In fact, GMO crops, which came about in the late 90s, early 2000s, are adding to soil that is taking a beating, adding more pesticides and chemicals into our soils and our foods. So when it comes to simplifying your food choices, you've really got to start with eating real food. That seems like a no-brainer, right? But when they ask kids, where does an apple come from? They can't tell you. I think this study was done in inner city Chicago, and they just asked food, where does your food come from, right? Where do oranges come from? And they couldn't tell you, right? So we're not necessarily eating real food, and we're not showing it to our families, our kids. So when we just cut out the processed foods, it can make a huge impact in the foods that our body is using as building blocks. Apple juice versus an apple, there are many components to that apple. There's fiber, and it's just a more well-rounded nutrition as opposed to a juice that takes an apple and creates a very specific form, and then they add sugar and other things to make it taste really delicious. You're taking out a lot of components. So when you think about proteins, it's best to be taken from an animal source. I got this from the Handbook for Nutrition. There's lots of things out there that talk about best protein sources. If you follow more of a vegan or a vegetarian, I hate to use the word diet because I think there's a lot of negative connotations, but if you follow more of modified nutrition where you're doing more vegan or vegetarian sources, there are other options for you. But if you do eat protein, eating from an animal source is really valuable. Now, what the animal ate is something that you are also consuming. So if our cows are consuming a lot of genetically modified grains, and first of all, cows aren't meant to eat grains, they're meant to eat grass. And so how a cow uses grain as building blocks can cause a different type of stress to the system. But if our animals are eating genetically modified foods or foods that have been laden with pesticides or fungicides or herbicides as a way to, produce crops, we are getting double that, right? We're getting what the cow is eating as their building blocks to, use as our building blocks. But anyway, that's a side note. So you got to think about what is the quality of food that our animals are eating that are our source of protein. But you think about protein as eggs, meat, fish, chicken, even yogurt and cheese, right? Any byproducts from our proteins. Fats, should always come from a natural source, from nature. Think butter, think lard, think nuts, seeds, avocado, coconut oil. You know, bad fats are any of the seed oils or oils that are processed in a factory, like canola oil, soybean, peanut oil, right? Those are a lot of oils used in restaurants because they're really cheap, but they can have a pretty detrimental impact on our health. And then carbohydrates, I think carbs oftentimes get a bad rep, but you have simple carbohydrates and you have complex carbohydrates. Both play a role. Simple carbohydrates are easier to break down. They're a faster energy source. Typically, more processed foods are simple carbohydrates. Complex are vegetables and fruits. It requires more energy for our body to break down. They're more well-rounded. But you also have rice, oats, quinoa, legumes, things like that. I want to share this with you. So a lot of people think eating organic is can be expensive. Hi, Dr. Kristen. Hi, Jen. But I want you to see that if you can choose an organic food, there is something called the clean 15 and dirty dozen. So if you follow this, let me see where I am here.
There's actually an app for that if you look it up.
Oh, thank you. That's great. I think somebody's told me that before too. So there's an app for it. Makes it really easy. This is what the EWG came out in 2020. They said, you know, let me zoom in for you. They said, you know, we're all on a budget in terms of, you know, the foods that we eat when we're shopping. But if you can choose to shop organic for the dirty dozen, because those are the most highly absorbed fruit. Typically, it's a softer fruit that's more absorbent in terms of if you spray anything on it. So strawberries has topped out the list for years. Typically, strawberry spinach are, you know, fighting for 1 and 2. So when you're grocery shopping, if you can choose to organic when it comes to the dirty dozen, you're going to be saving yourself. And the clean 15 are, you know, you can choose more conventional foods from this list and, you know, save here when you're budgeting. So just look this up, Dirty Dozen, Clean 15, or look up the app, and this can help you with making choices that organic practices have to go through a more regimented process to keep chemicals out of the farming process. It is typically, you have to jump through the hoops. So these farmers have gone through a lot of work with, you know, getting that.
Just an FYI, the name of the app is actually called Dirty Dozen.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Dirty Dozen. So write that on your notes. The other thing where you can really cut down is cooking at home. You know, everything you put into your foods at home, you know, right? You don't necessarily add in any fillers, or you can be aware of the foods that you're cooking in, oils that you're cooking with. So cooking from home is one of the best things you can do. And that requires some preparation. And so sometimes you can make this fun by just printing off a meal plan. Let's go here. I think it's right here. Sorry, let's see here. Let's go to this one. You can just search on Google, weekly meal planner, super easy, but they make really fun ones. And if you just spend time to prepare for your week, what you're going to eat and grocery shop, this makes cooking really easy. It can be fun, make it a family affair. But when you are eating in more than you're eating out, you're setting yourself up to succeed in terms of the foods that you're choosing, right? How you're snacking, the quality of foods. Because typically if you go to a restaurant, they aren't following the Dirty Dozen, Clean 15, right? They're doing what is going to be most cost efficient. And I want to show you this thing. I'm happy to share this. There's a lot of food additives to processed foods. I just want to show you a few of them. Aspartame. A lot of people have heard of aspartame. It is a neurotoxin. It is toxic to the brain and nervous system. Typically used in things for that are called diet or sugar-free products, like Diet Coke, Coke Zero. It's also known as E951. I mean, if you ever look at any ingredients label, if you are having a hard time, pronouncing it, if you don't know what it is, likely not something you should be eating. But anyway, if you see E951 on a label, that is aspartame. It's in Jell-O, desserts, sugar-free gum, drink mixes, tabletop sweeteners, cereal, breath mints, pudding, Kool-Aid, iced tea, chewable vitamins. They put it in vitamins. Maybe they want to taste good. I don't know. Toothpaste, cough syrup, right? And let's just see, aspartame, not your friend, neurotoxin, and it's a carcinogen, so it's cancer causing. Not only is it bad for the brain, but it's bad for if you don't want cancer. Known to erode intelligence and affect short-term memory. The components of this toxic sweetener may lead to a wide variety of ailments, including brain tumor, diseases like lymphoma, diabetes, MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, fibromyalgia, shall I go on, right? This is something used widely. And I mean, this is the top 10, not great, but they're all there and they all have, they cause stress in the body. So high fructose corn syrup is added to almost every processed food: breads, candies, yogurts, salad dressings, canned vegetables, cereals. Big problem. MSGs, trans fats, dyes, right? So I just want you to be aware, it's not just about pesticides and fungicides and herbicides that are used to grow our foods. It is in every food that is processed. So that's where it can start to get a little bit, it can be a lot in terms of trying to clean things up. And that's where it's just simplifying your food, choosing to eat at home, right? So let me just see what I got. This is the last slide, and then I want to wrap up here. Again, just going back to simplifying your food choices. Did you realize that in places like Colorado, yes, we do have some agriculture around, so some foods come from Colorado, but a lot of things are, trucked in from California, or some of these states who are bigger producing. A lot comes from California. And so the way that they try and preserve our food is they irradiate our food. They expose the foods to radiation to destroy any various strains of harmful bacteria that can provide a longer shelf life, right? So by the time our food gets to our grocery store, and maybe it was picked a week or 2 weeks ago, right? And so if you can choose foods that are seasonal and foods that are local, then you're getting a higher quality food that has more nutrition and it hasn't been radiated, which probably, again, takes some of the health out of that food. So this is what I love. We have lots of farmers markets. We have community supported agriculture, which is called a CSA, that are in the city or, up and around the foothills, Greeley, Kersey. I mean, we've got a lot of availability in terms of supporting local farmers who are producing local foods, seasonal foods. So I want you to search CSA or community supported agriculture. See if you can get some local foods. You can also start a garden. Super easy to do. You can get food right from your backyard. And avoid genetically engineered or genetically modified foods. You can search this one, but there are like the top 5 or 6 genetically modified foods. Corn, soy, I guess I have them all here, but corn and soy are big ones. And canola oil, cottonseed oil, which are used a lot in cooking, those typically genetically modified. And you can get into potatoes, some tomatoes, and I see papaya, squash, sugar beets, also big genetically modified. So again, simplifying, how can you do maybe some healthy food swaps, right? So using plain yogurt with honey instead of flavored yogurt, adding fruit to your water instead of juice, maybe choosing veggie noodles instead of your typical spaghetti noodle or pasta noodle, dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate, nuts instead of chips, veggies and hummus instead of crackers, eggs instead of cereal. There's things you can do to swap your foods that are just more nutrient dense, right? So I think it's first understanding, what are you eating? And how can you start adding swaps to that are healthier, healthier choices, right? So because I started late, I apologize, I'm going over. So I want to end here. Let's see, because our next conversation around this will be really looking at how you can support your nutrition with supplementation, because it is just necessary, because the foods that we eat are not as nutrient dense as they once were. So this is a question we ask a lot in the office. What is the most important and what is essential to health? Okay. And a lot of times people will say food. Food is definitely the most essential to health. And I agree, food is absolutely important. Okay. My question is, how long can you live without food before you die? Right? It's essential. So typically it's weeks, right? If you don't have food, you will move towards death. So this is my vital needs triangle. Let me see here. What's going on? There we go. So nourishment. Yet there's something more important than food. Even around this entire conversation, talking about nutrition essentials and supporting the health of your cells at a fundamental level, making sure that the building blocks they have to make sure all processes take place. There's something more important than food that will take away life or add to life faster than food. And that is water, right? How long can you live without water? It is
days.
Yes, it is days, right? So if you come across somebody in the wilderness who is passed out, are you going to give them food or are you going to give them water, right? What is going to restore life faster? Water, right? You're not going to give them a candy bar. No. Didn't we learn anything from this nutritional essentials? We're not going to give them an apple. We're going to give them water, because that will restore their health faster. But there's something more important than water when it comes to essentials, and that is oxygen. That is our air, the air we breathe, right? If you have a windpipe that is occluded or completely blocked, are you going to give somebody water? You give them some food? No, you want to get them air. You want to get that airway opened up, right? Somebody triages the scene when there is an accident going on. They're looking at, is there blood, right? Are they losing oxygen? Are there blocked airways, right? They're not looking at what they ate for breakfast this morning. So when you look at the vital needs, you've got to look at what is going to restore life or what's going to take away life. And there's something even more important than oxygen, and that is nerve flow. This is not included in a lot of conversations, and this is where chiropractic plays a role. If you cut that spinal cord, how quickly does it stop life? It is instantaneous, right? And so what is the fastest way to restore life? It is to allow for a better connection between your brain and your body, right? More important than oxygen, more important than water, more important than food is that brain-body connection. And so this is how amazing your body is, because you can, for years and decades, you can lose that nerve flow and you can slowly move towards disease and death, but you don't see it for decades. And then you have a heart attack, right? That's why we say subluxation is in the category of cancer and chronic disease, because we don't know about it. So nutrition, no question, vital and important for your health. But if you don't have proper nerve function, then everything you eat is not appropriately absorbed within the body. Just like if you're not hydrated and you don't have good oxygen. So all are important. But this is where I want to circle back to the fact that you are getting chiropractic care and you are getting reconnected to the life force and your brain so it can better process all the things you're doing. And that's where I find people who are under chiropractic care are more open to doing things that create health because they can think more clearly, because they have energy, because they're sleeping better, and they want to make better choices when it comes to their health. So congratulations to all of you who show up tonight to really learn about, you know, the importance of nutrition, what you can do to simplify your food choices, but also showing up to learn, grow, and be consistent with your chiropractic care. That's truly amazing. So thank you for being with me tonight. I apologize that I got started late. If you have questions, I'm going to stop recording here. I'm happy to take those questions. So